I don't know if you've ever had the displeasure of dealing with a neighbor who thinks the world revolves around what she thinks is beautiful. But, if you haven't, let me introduce you to my new reality. A woman who calls herself the moral and aesthetic guardian of the neighborhood. That's right, she appeared in my life with the same subtlety as a hurricane collapsing at a picnic. The first time I saw the woman was when she appeared at my gate with a notepad in her hand, glasses hanging from the end of her nose, and a pose like the inspector from hell. She looked at my garden, which, by the way, was well kept, as if she were seeing a crime scene, and without even saying good morning, she let loose. Did you know that the color of your gate violates the community's visual guidelines? I swear for 2 seconds I thought it was a prank. I laughed. I thought someone was going to come out with a camera and congratulate me on being the victim of the day. But no, she was serious. Serious and offensively nosy. I looked at my gate, light beige. Nothing flashy, nothing absurd, just a gate. But in her mind, it was almost an affront to the civil code of the United States. And from that day on, she never stopped. Every week there was a new complaint. Once because I left the garbage bag outside for 5 minutes before the truck came by. Another time because my lawn had grown half a centimeter more than allowed. Guys, half a centimeter. I'm not making this up. She measured it with a ruler. This woman carries a ruler in her handbag, as if it were a sword ready to cut into other people's freedom. But she crossed the line when she showed up with 2 men, 2 guys dressed in black, with generic badges around their necks and a clipboard in their hands. They came to my gate as if they were government officials, saying that my property was irregular and that they had orders from the HOA to notify me of a possible seizure. Yes, they used that word, seizure, as if my house were a car parked in a prohibited place. The woman, all perked up next to the 2 of them, seemed to be silently enjoying every second of it. You could see in her eyes that she thought she had won, that she was finally going to get me out of my corner, kick me out of my own home, and give her the glory of cleaning up the neighborhood of an unwanted element like me. The plan was simple according to the officials. Either I regularized the structure of the roof, the windows, and even the style of the mailbox. I swear to God they mentioned the mailbox, or they would proceed with the process of compulsory removal of the property. I listened quietly, as if I were watching a documentary about the rise of collective insanity, except that the documentary was my life, my home, my peace, my dog, Thor, in fact. This is where he comes in. Because while I was listening to this horror show, he was sitting on the side of the door, looking at me with that, "Can I go ahead, Dad?" face. Thor is my German Shepherd, 45 kilograms of muscle, teeth, and unconditional loyalty, trained, intelligent, and with a sense of smell that would put even a lie detector to shame. And believe me, he didn't like the visitors anymore. I took a deep breath, asked for a minute, and went inside to get my cell phone. I said I was going to call my lawyer, and that's when Thor understood everything. He saw my tone, he saw my face, and above all, he saw the contempt that the 3 people outside were throwing at our home. By the time I got back, they were walking around the garden, looking at everything, writing things down, the woman pointing at the air conditioning as if she'd seen a nuclear warhead installed on the roof. And before I could say anything, Thor opened the door with his snout and stepped forward. But calm down, no tragedy. He didn't bite anyone. He just showed that he's the boss in this territory. He went straight for the guy on the left, who was holding the clipboard, and started barking with such intensity that he almost tripped over his own feet. The other guy took 2 steps back with a "What kind of hell dog is that?" look on his face. And the woman? She let out a high-pitched scream that sounded like a pressure kettle about to explode. Thor stopped there, in the middle of the grass, growling low, showing his teeth. That was enough. The 2 fake officers turned around. And she, well, she still tried to keep her pose, saying something like, "This will go in the report." But her voice was shaking so much that she looked like she was going to faint. They left, without saying another word. Thor returned to my side as if to say, "Mission accomplished," and I closed the gate with a slight smile on my face. But I knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I thought that after the frustrating visit with the clipboard officers and Thor's spectacular performance, the woman would be ashamed of herself and give up. Not at all. Shame is a luxury item for these types of people. If there's one thing they have more than conceit, it's free time. And she seemed to have plenty of both. The difference is that now she's come back even more theatrical. And wow, this time she even brought a new costume. The scene was so ridiculous that for a moment I thought someone was recording an episode of some bad reality show. I wouldn't have doubted it if she had crowdfunded the HOA members to rent 2 better extras, with uniforms that looked like they had been taken from a costume store specializing in suburban police. They wore tactical masks, the kind that hide your identity more than they protect you from anything real. On their chests was a camera attached with insulating tape. The name on the uniform? Citizen Inspection of Community Properties. I don't know how I wrote that without laughing. When I saw their car pull up in front of my house, I felt a chill. But it wasn't fear. It was anger mixed with indignation. A mixture of, "Here comes shit," and, "Today, I'm going to sue." The 3 of them got out of the car as if they were about to invade an enemy base. One of them was carrying an unplugged megaphone, probably just to look more official, and the woman followed close behind, carrying a red folder as if she were a doomsday promoter. And the most bizarre thing? They came with a printed sheet, saying that my house was provisionally embargoed for not being structurally compliant with the association's parameters. Structural. Yes, now the problem was structural. I'd like to know where this residents' association got a civil engineer, because as far as I know, none of the 3 of them even knows the difference between cement and plaster. To make matters worse, they started recording everything. One of them pointed the camera directly at my face while he read the supposed embargo notice out loud, with an intonation more forced than an amateur volleyball referee. The woman stood to the side, smiling with that look of someone who thinks they're going to go viral on the internet for having done justice. What she didn't know was that there was no celebrity there, only shame. I kept my cool, but inside, the pressure was mounting. My fists were already clenched, and Thor, inside, had already sensed the mood. He doesn't bark for nothing, but when he barks, my friend, the neighborhood listens. And it did. This time, I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't even go inside. I stayed right there on the balcony, watching their ridiculous act while thinking about the fine they should get for publicly displaying their stupidity. At one particular moment, one of them even put a foot in my garden. One step, that was all it took for Thor to appear at the window. I didn't even have to open the door. He started barking in a way that sounded like the devil himself was trying to invade paradise. And the funniest thing? The extra with the camera fell backwards. Literally. He tripped on a piece of sidewalk and fell sitting down, almost dropping all his equipment on the ground. The other tried to hold his pose, but took 2 steps backwards so fast that his clipboard flew away. The woman, in the middle of it all, was still trying to keep control of the operation, but her voice was already breaking. She still had the nerve to shout, "We're legal! This is a process authorized by the committee!" I replied with a debauched smile on my face, crossing my arms and not taking my eyes off them. "Then call the sheriff. Let's see if he can confirm what you're making up." That was the second conversation, and the last one needed. From then on, it was all downhill. The extra who had fallen was now standing up and trying to clean his muddy pants. The other slowly walked away, not knowing whether to record, run, or pretend he was just passing by. And the woman? Oh, the woman! She stood still, trying to hold her pose, but you could see in her eyes that she was thinking, this wasn't supposed to end like this. But it did, because in the end, none of them called the police, the sheriff, a lawyer, a fireman, or anything else that could justify all that nonsense. They went back to the car, defeated, muttering among themselves. The woman was the last to get in. She still gave them a look of contempt mixed with anger. It won't stay that way look. Thor kept barking inside. He only stopped when he saw that the car was already on the other street, the street of shame. The whole neighborhood already knew. There were people peeking through the windows, others disguising themselves on the sidewalk with their dogs. I even saw Dave, the gentleman at the end of the street who never talks to anyone, laughing as he pretended to prune the hedge. But the icing on the cake came 3 days later. I received a letter from the association itself, a letter with letterhead and everything. The content? An apology. According to the committee, the woman acted without formal authorization and deviated from the conduct expected by members of the HOA board. In other words, they were now trying to disassociate themselves from the circus she had set up. They quickly threw her into the fire, but something told me that she wasn't going to take it quietly. These kinds of people don't back down. They disappear for a few days and come back with even worse ideas. And if there's one thing I've learned from living in this neighborhood, it's that silence after a public embarrassment doesn't mean peace. It means planning. And guess what? I was right. It was 10 days of silence. 10 long days in which that woman disappeared from the street, from the sidewalk, from the neighborhood gossip corridors. Not a shadow. It seemed as if she had been deported to another condominium. But anyone who has had the displeasure of dealing with this kind of person knows that the disappearance is just the dramatic pause before the next act. And the next act has arrived. It began with a community breakfast organized by the HOA, printed invitation, pastel colors, all very formal. A moment of harmony between neighbors, they said. Free coffee, donuts, children running around the tennis court, and the same old people pretending that the world is a margarine commercial. I got suspicious right away. When these people start talking too much about unity and neighborliness, it's because they want to shove some misfortune in your lap. I went to the event for 2 reasons. The first was to see for myself if it really was just bread and butter, or if there was poison in the recipe. The second, and more important, was to monitor the woman's movements. And there she was, sitting behind a table adorned with a lacy tablecloth, dark glasses, impeccable hair, serving coffee as if she were the mother superior of the world's most fake convent. She smiled like someone who has never tried to invade someone else's property or pretend to be a judicial authority with 2 extras and a megaphone. But the most bizarre thing wasn't her presence. It was the fact that everyone was acting as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't been publicly disallowed by the HOA itself. It was as if the scandal had evaporated, and now she was back in office like someone returning from a long vacation. That bothered me more than if she had come back shouting. The calm gave me the shivers. It was at the end of coffee that the new plan was announced. A so-called community reintegration project, approved by an internal vote, which provided for the review and reorganization of public and semi-private areas in the neighborhood. The words were nice, but behind every syllable, you could smell the scam. The plan, according to the woman herself, aimed to integrate land and structures that were not in line with the aesthetics and functionality envisaged in the urban coexistence plan. In other words, she wanted to get her hands on any piece of land that didn't suit her personal taste. And guess which was the first plot listed as in disagreement with structural standards? Mine. They didn't even disguise it. When I read my name on the poorly designed pamphlet they handed out at the end, my blood boiled. The justification was a mixture of joke and affront. Non-standardized fencing, roof with misaligned slope, and presence of a guard animal without prior communication to the HOA. Thor. The problem now was my dog. Of course it was. After the fiasco with the 2 fake inspectors and the camera taped up, she needed a new angle, and she decided to hit where she knew it would hurt. She tried to paint Thor as a risk to the integrity of the community. That's right. The same dog that only barks when it sees a thug was considered dangerous. Meanwhile, her son, who has already crashed his car drunk twice in less than a year, was still a young man coming of age. Breakfast turned into lunch, and little by little the neighbors dispersed. But the woman stayed, sitting there, impassive, organizing the papers for the new project, as if she were preparing a federal tender. Her eyes were hidden behind her sunglasses, but her mouth was already rehearsing political smiles. There was something about her that was colder than any direct threat. The calm, the patience of someone who knows how to manipulate time in favor of her own wishes. The following Monday, I found a notice on the gate, unsigned, a piece of paper folded in half, printed in Arial 11 font, and with a strange stamp that looked more like a Sunday school stamp than something official. The content? A new structural assessment scheduled for the following Saturday, and the recommendation that the guard animal should be temporarily removed from the property for the safety of the assessors. Thor, out of the house, just on the day of the supposed inspection. You didn't have to be a genius to understand the plan. Get the dog out, go in, register some supposed irregularity, and maybe even try to remove some part of the land. With him out of the way, the house would be open like a safe without a password. That's when the decision was made. Did that woman want war? There was going to be one, but with proof, with cameras, with a dossier. I spent the next week installing a complete surveillance system with motion sensors, cameras in every corner, even on the lamppost, on the sidewalk. In disguise, of course. I spoke to a lawyer, told him the whole story, and he advised me to let everything go as they wanted, as long as I documented everything. On Friday, the day before the inspection, I made sure to leave the gate locked, and a very large sign saying, "Private property. Entry without a court order will be considered trespassing." And underneath, the best part, area monitored by cameras, dogs loose. She showed up before the scheduled time, 40 minutes early to be precise, alone this time. No extras, no megaphone, just her and her little red folder. She looked at the gate, looked at the sign, and for the first time, hesitated. Her hand went to the intercom, but she didn't press it. She went back. She read the sign again. She looked around. Thor was there, lying by the door, silent, but with his gaze fixed on her. And maybe, just maybe, she understood at that moment that crossing that line could be costly. She turned around. She walked slowly to her car, and before she got in, she looked back at the house, a look that was more tired than angry, like someone who realizes they've lost the game, but still wants to pretend it was a draw. Except it wasn't a draw, because that Saturday, the whole neighborhood saw that she had failed, and that hurt more than any scream. A week after the inspection that didn't happen, I received the official notice from the HOA dropping all charges against my property. It was a cold, bureaucratic piece of paper that tried to sound neutral, as if it had all been a misunderstanding and not an orchestrated invasion attempt with extras, clipboards, and a leader who acts like she's the sheriff of an Old West town. At the end of the letter, a generic administrative committee signature and an invitation to discuss improvements in communion. What communion? The woman almost turned my yard into a battlefield, and you think I'm going to sit down with her for tea? I made a point of framing this letter and hanging it on the living room wall, right next to Thor's collar. Trophy of the resistance. But not every story ends with a letter. Some end with an exhibition. And that's exactly what happened. Remember the cameras I installed? Well, one of the videos captured something that completely changed the course of the soap opera. The week after the attempted inspection, she came back at night, on foot, wearing a cap and a coat, trying to disguise herself. She thought she'd be clever. She wanted to get in through the side gate, possibly to take a compromising photo or perhaps install some crap to justify a new complaint. The video shows it all. Her pushing the gate, trying to force the latch, tripping over a plant pot, falling to her knees, getting up, wiping her pants and running back to the street with her tail between her legs. A scene straight out of a slapstick movie. And the best bit? One of the sensors activated the security light just in time, catching her face perfectly. It looked like a scene from a security camera commercial, the kind that shows how to protect your home from intruders. I showed the video to my lawyer. He almost fell off his chair laughing. He said we could file a lawsuit not only for attempted invasion, but also for harassment and moral damage. And that's what we did. We put together a dossier with all the records, the false inspectors, the attempted embargo, the leaflets, the video. Every page of the lawsuit was a punch to the morale of the community leader. But the tastiest part of the story was yet to come. While the lawsuit was going its legal way, the video began to circulate in the group of neighbors. It wasn't me who leaked it, of course. Let's just say that an anonymous contributor thought that the community deserved to know who the real guardian of morals and good manners was. Within a few hours, half the street had watched the scene of the fall in slow motion, and no one took her side. The people had had enough. She was tired of the absurd rules, the aggressive notes left on doors, the phantom fines, the patrol of other people's tastes. She could no longer leave the house without hearing someone whispering at the neighboring gate. And yet, she tried to resist. She tried to pretend that nothing had happened, that everything was fine, that she was still the strong woman on the HOA flyer. But the empire of rigid income began to crumble. The final blow came at the association's special meeting. They made a point of holding it in person at the community center to ensure that everyone could see the circus unfold live. And there she was, sitting at the front, wearing a beige blazer and a rehearsed smile, as if she still had control of the situation. The interim president began reading the agenda items and, on the second topic, dropped the bombshell. Motion to remove the current leader of the compliance committee. The room fell silent. For a few seconds, all that could be heard was the sound of the plastic chair creaking when she turned around in surprise. She looked around for support, but no one stood up for her. No hands went up. Not that gentleman who always brought corn cakes to meetings, nor the lady who used to say that she was firm but fair. Everyone was silent. They voted. It was unanimous. 38 votes in favor of dismissal, none against. Even she didn't have the courage to vote for herself. She left the room in silence. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She just got up, picked up her bag, and walked out, swallowed up by her own arrogance. Her back bent, her chin trembling, her steps slow. For the first time, she looked human. A few days later, I received her last piece of correspondence, a handwritten note in hurried handwriting, trying to justify everything as misunderstandings, saying that she acted impulsively for the sake of order, and asking that things stay between us, a request for peace, disguised as a request for silence. I tore up the note and threw it away. She didn't deserve the privilege of discreet oblivion. The process continued. I didn't even have to attend the final hearing. The judge, after seeing the video and the documents, imposed a hefty fine for trespassing and also ruled that she couldn't come within 100 meters of my house. Irony of fate. She moved out the following month. She sold the house for less than she bought it for, had to pay the court costs, and left behind a load of furniture and artificial plants. Thor, he's still here. Calmer now, less barking at night, but always alert. The real guardian of the street. People pass by on the sidewalk and wave to him. Others leave cookies at the gate. He became a local celebrity after the story. Even the newsagent came round one day with a new collar as a present for him. The HOA, it has undergone renovations. The committee was renewed, the bylaws adjusted, and for the first time in years, no one was fined for planting a crooked tree or painting the garage door an unapproved shade. The neighborhood breathed a sigh of relief. The neighborhood was once again a place where people take care of their own lives, which, deep down, is all anyone wants. Today, when I look at my beige gate, the one that started this whole mess, I don't just see a color. I see resistance. I see a symbol of the freedom to live in peace, without an aesthetic patrol or a manual of good manners in the form of a dictatorship. Sometimes all you need is a good dog, a camera, and a lot of patience to put up with people who think they're more important than the world. And maybe, just maybe, a bit of luck to see them trip over their own arrogance. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.